Does your main character change or remain steadfast? A lot of writers think a character must change in order to grow, and this is simply not true. Characters can also grow in their resolve. In that case, they remain steadfast, as they must grow stronger and stronger in their beliefs in order to hold out against increasingly powerful obstacles. Now, regardless of whether your main character changes or not, how does he or she get there? Does your character simply flip a switch at the end of the story, or does he or she grapple with and grieve over the issue right up to the moment of truth? Well, in fact, there are quite a number of different dramatic pathways by which a main character can arrive at that moment of truth. And the more of these you have in your writer's bag of tricks, the more dramatic variety you can bring to your character's journeys. So let's take a look at a few of your options. Number 1, the steady Freddy. Now, this kind of main character starts out with a fixed belief about the central personal issue of the story. Then, act by act, scene by scene, he gathers more information that leads him to question those pre-held beliefs. His hold on the old attitude gradually weakens until, at the moment of truth, he simply steps over to the other side, or not. Now, this kind of character slowly changes until he's not committed to either his original belief or the alternative. It all comes down to which way the wind is blowing when he ultimately must choose one or the other. Number 2, the griever. A griever main character is also confronted with building evidence that his original belief was an error, but unlike the steady Freddy, this character suffers a growing internal conflict that starts to tear him apart. The griever feels honor-bound or morally obligated to stick with his old loyalties, yet becomes more and more compelled to jump ship and adopt the new. At the end of the story, he must make a leap of faith, choosing either the old or new, because with such a balance created, there's not even a hint as to which way would ultimately be better. Number 3, the Weaver character. Now, this Weaver main character starts out with one belief system, then shifts to adopt the alternative, then shifts back again, and again, and again, like a sine wave. He weaves back and forth every time he gathers new information that indicates he's currently in error in his point of view. The intensity of these swings depends on the magnitude of each bit of new information and the resoluteness of the character to begin with. Number 4, the Waffler. Unlike the Weaver, the Waffler jumps quickly from one point of view to the other depending on the situation of the moment. He may be sincere but overly pragmatic, or he may be opportunistic and not hold either view with any real conviction. Now, there's also 2 kinds of characters who change, but not really. One of these, number 5, the exception maker. This character reaches the critical point of the story and decides that although he will retain his original beliefs, meaning that he's steadfast, he'll make an exception in this case. Well, this character would be a change character if the story is about whether or not he will budge at all on the particular issue, especially since he's never made an exception before. But if the story is about whether he has permanently altered his nature, then he'd be seen as steadfast instead, because we know he'll never make another exception again. So with the exception maker, you must be very careful to let your audience know against which standard it should evaluate change, that he made an exception or that it's the only exception that he'll ever make. Number 6, the Backslider. Now, similar to the exception maker, the Backslider changes at the critical moment, but then reverses himself and goes right back to his old belief system. In such a story, the character would be said to change because its belief system that has been judged by the audience has now altered by the time you get to the denouement. In effect, the Backslider changes within the confines of the story structure, but then he reverts to his old nature after the structure is closed and in the portion that's only storytelling. Here's an example. It's a little complicated, but this will help. This occurs in the James Bond film On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Well, this is the only Bond film in which 007 actually changes his nature, at least the only original series of Bond films before we started getting into the recent things with Daniel Craig. Here, he's finally found love in Her Majesty's Secret Service, which has filled that hole in his heart that previously drove him and allowed him to be a super-secret agent. He resigns the force and gets married. End of structure. Story is over. That resolves the character's issue that's driven him not only through that story, but all the other stories that led up to that point. Once that's happened, after the denouement, then in the additional storytelling, as he's driving off to his honeymoon, his wife is killed by the villain, kind of almost a deus ex machina, and his angst is restored again, so good old James Bond can return just as he was in the next sequel. That's the real crucial aspect of dealing with the Backslider, is to know when the actual story's message or argument is over, and then if you want to change him back, it happens in the storytelling portion after the story is actually completed and the judgment has been passed. Now, variations on these are available. For example, each of these kinds of characters may be aware that he or she is flirting with change, or may not be aware. They may simply grieve over the situations or just breeze through them even, never considering how they might be changing in either case. Each of these characters may arrive at a leap of faith where they must make a conscious decision to do things the same way or a different way. Or they may arrive at a non-leap of faith story conclusion, where they never even realize they've been changed. They've just become changed over the course of the story. The important thing is that the audience know if the main character has changed or not. Otherwise, they can't evaluate the results of the dramatic argument and the message you're trying to convey, whether it was good to change or not. So there are many ways to change or not change. And if you avoid getting stuck in simply linear progression of a binary choice between the two, your characters will come across as much more human and much more interesting. Now here's your chance to become a master storyteller. Describe characters from a story you've written or are planning to write, whether they change or remain steadfast. What aspects of their nature is changed or not? And then select one of these basic character arcs that we just described for each of those characters. Finally, describe the events or interchanges with the other characters that mark key points along that selected arc for each of the characters. If you use these techniques, you'll end up with much more human characters and a much more organic feel to the ultimate change or the ultimate decision to remain steadfast. Well, for more writing tips like this, please visit our website at storymind.com. I'm Melanie Ann Phillips, co-creator of the Dramatic Theory of Story and creator of Storyweaver software. Till next time.